Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from Lagos, the nation's commercial nerve center and our global headquarters. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Let's bring you up to speed with the big happenings in politics and in the polity at midday. From Katsina to Kwara, bandits wreak havoc, killed 20 persons in Katsina, 40 in Kwara communities. Police launch manhunt against perpetrators. Leadership of the nation's electoral umpire, led by its chairman, Professor Joash Amupitan, meets the civil society organizations in Abuja in preparation for area councils, Osun State and Ekiti State elections. Let's get started with a very disturbing developing story where we can tell you that at least 40 persons have now been killed by terrorists in Woro and Nuku communities in Kayima local government area of Kwara State. Several houses were also reportedly burnt by the hoodlums. According to a source, the local government, who pleaded anonymity, the terrorists reportedly came to preach to residents in the two communities about abandoning their Nigerian constitution and embracing the Quran. However, there were some dissenting voices among the people, which reportedly led to the bandits opening fire on the congregation. The source also said the troops of soldiers and forest guards have been deployed to the two communities to ensure safety and security. The state government has condemned the attacks and commiserated with the families of the victims. Meanwhile, over in Katsina State, a deadly attack by armed bandits in Faskari local government area has left at least 20 persons dead, properties destroyed, and many rendered homeless. The fresh attack took place on Tuesday evening in Doma community, with bandits invading the community at about 4:30 p.m., shooting sporadically. The Commissioner of Police in the state, CP Bellosho, has directed the deployment of additional resources to enable rapid investigation. A very, very disturbing story there. We can also tell you that troops of Operation Hadinkai Joint Task Force have captured and destroyed the notorious ISWAP terrorist detention facility with the Dikimdu Triangle in Gubja local government area of Yobe State. The Media Information Office of the Theater Commander in Maiduguri, Lieutenant Colonel Sani Uba, in a statement described the development as a significant advance into the areas long considered beyond the reach of security forces, and underscores the growing effectiveness and stability of the ongoing counter-insurgency operations. The operation was conducted as part of Operation Desert Sanity, following sustained offensive pressure and intelligence-led maneuvers that forced terrorist elements to abandon critical facilities deep within their strongholds. The 3 detention facilities were deliberately demolished, permanently denying ISWAP the ability to reuse or reoccupy the site. And away from security stories, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, is holding a consultative meeting with members of the civil society organizations at the commission's headquarters. The aim of the meeting is to brief the CSOs about the commission's preparations for the forthcoming area council elections in the FCT, as well as the Ekiti state governorship elections set to take place in July this year. The commissioner also says the commission has drawn up a timetable and schedule of activities for the 2027 general election, but will be unable to release it yet due to the ongoing amendments to the electoral law by the National Assembly. And away from that, earlier this morning we had some royalties in our breakfast program, The Morning Brief, where one of the persons, the royal fathers, Emir Sanusi II, the Emir of Kano, has spoken about a couple of issues, including issues around whether or not he subscribes to the idea of ensuring that traditional institutions are captured in the Constitution, as well as women representation. This is what he had to say when we asked him that question earlier today.
I don't even support this whole move of putting us in the Constitution. You see, look, we already have a National Council of Traditional Rulers. Okay, we're able to, historically, Kano was never part of the East, and Obia Furniture was never part of the Sokoto Caliphate, okay? So we come out, and the Obia Furniture is the paramount leader among the Igbos. Okay? I'm number 3 in the Sokoto Caliphate. As we come out, he's number 1 among his people. I defer to him. On the simple principle of equality of ethnic groups.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, if I see the I mean, the entire kingdom, what I call Ife, is no more than maybe 2 or 3 local governments in Kano today. But if he's a paramount leader of the Yorubas, you treat him the way and I'm number 3, because you give him that precedence. Nobody needs to tell me in the Constitution that if he is the number 1 among Igbo leaders, I'm number 3 in Sokoto Caliphate, if you come to a place, you give him that respect and say, Obi, please go ahead. That is not something you write in the Constitution. It's something that's cultural. Do you understand?
Absolutely.
Now, when you begin to legislate these things, you remove that level of flexibility. Okay, because I said culture is dynamic. The relevance we have does not stem from the Constitution. To be honest, if politicians had their way, there'd be no emirs. There'd be no OBs, honestly. Okay? The reason we exist is because the people want us. One of the things we need to do is look at the structural arrangements politically in our country. Okay, and I've always said, for example, if you take our Constitution talks about diversity. But what is diversity? It says it's diversity of states. But is that the only diversity we need to take care of? Should our Constitution not make a provision for a certain minimum representation of women in the cabinet and in the assembly? I mean, in my state, we have a state house of assembly. We have 40 members. As far as I know, since 1999 till now, we haven't had a single female member of the House of Assembly. Now, none of those men has ever been the victim of domestic violence. None of them is a victim of gender-based violence. It's not their fault that they're not thinking like women, but if you had 10, 15 women there would be bills talking about women issues.
And that is where we will piggyback on as far as the issue of women representation is concerned, especially in governance. The issue about affirmative action has just been literally a mirage. Different governments have tried and what looks more like tokenism in that sense. But there's a push to see whether women can have better representation. As a matter of fact, the truth is that it's widespread in so many places around here. When I say around here, I mean Nigeria and maybe some parts of Africa. But there are countries like Rwanda that are great models where their National Assembly, for instance, their own House of Reps constitute over maybe 70% are women. But here is a struggle. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Senate, I think we have about 4 to 6 women. I can remember Ipalibo Hari from Rivers State, Ireti Kingibe from the FCT, and we have Natasha Potiudwahan from Kogi State and one other senator. That's just about out of 109 senators. We can go down to the House of Representatives. In fact, according to His Royal Highness, the Emir of Kano is saying that he doesn't think that since 1999, a single woman has occupied the House of Assembly, and they have 40 members. So what exactly can be done to turn the tide around? Because there are bills that have been submitted that have gotten all kinds of pushback. But let's bring in our guest who will help us break it down. Austin Aigbe is a gender rights activist and a member of the civil society organization. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. Mr. Austin, good to see you.
To see you again, friend.
I'm sure you heard what the Emir said. If you were listening to what he talked about, look, there has to be some forceful, not using his words now, I'm adding forceful now, some level of structural inclusion, because when they talk about equality and diversity, sometimes is limited to certain things, that this women representation, we talk so much about it, but action is limited. What do you make of it?
Thank you again. I think the Royal Father, I don't know the kind of word to use, and I think I also like to borrow your word, even though it wasn't his word. I think this time we may have to use as men, say it is now time to forcefully include women. Maybe that'll be a better choice of word. But yes, before now, we've made all attempts to say that's not the only diversity, according to the Royal Father. That's not the only diversity. In the Nigerian Constitution, chapter 14 talked about the Federal Character Commission. It's to include all ethnic group or some kind of trouble representation in our leadership architecture. That the North, the South need to be represented in the affairs of the state. And that is why for the ministerial position, for instance, you have at least one state producing a minimum of one minister. In the National Assembly, you have those representation, 3 per state, and in the House of Representatives, then you have more depending on the landmass, depending on the population. Those are not the only diversity. There are diversity in terms of inclusion, gender, and what I heard very clearly from the real father is that it is time for a certain threshold of representation for women. And it's very, I don't want to use the word annoying. After the 2019 election, I actually got very angry. Despite the push, the effort made by all, the number of women representation in Nigerian political landscape actually nosedived, came down 3.6% National Assembly. It's worrisome. As the real father said, 15 states in Nigeria does not have any female in the state houses of parliament, state head of assembly. What that means is the issue of maternal health, children's issues and all of that, even education does not play any vital role in conversation. And that's not good at all.
I read your piece about special seat is democratic, and you're urging the National Assembly to do something. In fact, there's a line I like. You said, now the special seat bill offers a breakthrough. It is not a compromise. It is a resolution. As we've seen by history, the highest political height elected political height a woman has attained in Nigeria is to be speaker, and that was Patricia Ete. And you know how she was kicked out. Since then, a woman has not attained. In fact, let's even come to internal party democracy. I don't think I can remember, I stand to be corrected, a woman being the national chairman of any major political party. We have state chairmen, just a handful of them. So can we begin, where do we begin this conversation from? Because at face value, it doesn't look difficult, but when it comes to practice, it becomes almost impossible. Let's talk about the Senate. We have 3 senatorial districts in each state. 3 senatorial districts and then 1 in the FCT. Will it kill the men to surrender at least 1 in each of the states? Are we going to die as men if we surrender just 1 to these women and say, okay, let's just see? And that's an aggregation of 36. At least, by that will mean we have at least 36 women. Now, when we talked about gender-based violence and gender-related issues, we realize that it's a third of, if you bring like 3 women, 1 will give account of that. If you bring 6 women, and nobody really speaks for them. And they are the bigger majority in terms of the voting bloc by the data we see most of the time, or slightly less. So is it going to kill men to allow women to just get this position? How hard can that be?
Let me say directly, it will not kill men. And I don't even know what the contestation is. All men National Assembly, all men State Assembly, what difference has it made? I am not arguing that if you have women in, it will make any difference, but at least it will bring some level of inclusion. In fact, just answering your question straight, what the special seat bill is talking about is not to even attack any of those incumbent positions. Because part of the challenge initially was this fear by men that women want to take their position, which was merely disinformation in an attempt to continue.
Mr. Egbe, just hold on, just hold your thought. That statement you made, I don't understand that men are saying women want to take, did they give birth to the position? I don't understand. What does that mean in English?
Okay, so there was a bill before this time called the Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill. That bill has suffered too long in the National Assembly, part in 2006, 2007. Part of the accusation or the attack on that bill is that the women will come and take over their power. The women is coming to take over what they do. It's like a contestation. That they say that what is the title of the bill is gender and equal. So the men then thought that the word equal should not come in at all, that women are not equal. You know, that kind of narrative to suppress, to continue to suppress, again, women. And you remember there's one member of House of Representatives who stood up and said in the plenary that the women are the ones who voted for him. That what the bill is trying to say is to now tell the women not to vote for him, to vote for themselves. What that means is that there's some form of conflict, which is actually not correct. That's why I use the word disinformation. But the current bill is saying those three positions will remain to be contested by male and female. As of today, we know that male have more of the numbers. But let's create an additional special seat, which is that special seat, one per state, like you just suggested, that in these three members, can may surrender one. So there will be no need to surrender anyone. Those three will still be contested for by male and female. But for there to be some form of creative space, just bring an additional share into the assembly, into the Senate, into the House of Representatives, into the State House of Assembly, an additional chair. And that chair position will be contested solely by women. So that we make a deliberate effort to at least bring one woman per state in the Senate, one woman per state in the House of Representatives, one woman per local government in the State House of Assembly. Like in Kano, and Royal Father was saying, if you bring one woman per 40 local government, you may see have 40 men. Then you then have that average of those women now coming on board. That way, it reduces the tension of this is my position. In this case, there's no position that will be taken away. It's a new introduction. And I think that's what the men need to understand and vote the bill for the purpose of democracy. Democracy is about inclusion.
And when we come back, I want you to respond to the question of the costs of not including women in governance, as well as the ability to rally women to support women. I remember there was a primaries by the PDP a long time ago where I think Sarah Jibrin contested for a presidential ticket. I don't think she got any vote, and there were women as delegates. But we'll talk about that when we come back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about how to include women in governance, elective position essentially, as much as possible within the Nigerian polity, which has been quite abysmal depending on which leadership you're talking about. And my guest is Austin Aigbe, is a gender rights advocate as well as a member of the civil society. Mr. Aigbe, thanks for staying with us. Let's talk about what are we losing out for neglecting women, because there has to be a cost for what we're doing.
First, let me quickly talk about the final comment you made. The issue of women supporting women is a framing. In fact, as a conflict mitigator, part of what you do is to do some narrative, conflict theory, that women don't support women to further justify the wrong of not including women. The next question I would like to ask would be, does men support men? Why do men in politics actually fight each other? So politics is about interest. If your interests don't align, whether you're a male or a female, it's never going to align. So politics is politics, and those who have controlled politics for too long are male. And that is why you have the dominance of male in politics, and the weakness of female is because of the other very many things. You talked about political party just now. The gatekeepers in political party system, they are literally men. They are the ones who determine those who are selected or those who get the favor of consensus candidates. Now to your question, there's a lot to lose. Today, what matters in leadership is empathy. I've argued this again and again. Some of my friends have told me even men have empathy. I've argued that the greatest skill that leaders need today is empathy, and that we have more empathy in women. There's that thing that resonates in keeping a system, bringing to the fore issues of maternal health, concerns around poverty, concerns around insecurity. More women, there's a tendency that more women are likely to push an agenda that brings that change, that brings those kind of topics to the table, There are men who talk about the next election after the previous election. What I'm saying is that to bring it, to ensure that democracy works for us, that the issues of women, the issues of men, the issues of persons with disability, the issues of IDPs, those in the internally displaced person, those who are likely to champion those issues are more likely to be women. Those are the of not including women. And beyond that is that we have more than half or about half or less than half, whatever figure you have. There are those who believe that women are more. There are those who believe that it is equal. There are those who believe it's less. But if the number is half or less than half, imagine that less than half of the people in this country who vote, who have the power to, who have the opportunity to be voted for, does not come to the table for that conversation. Is a cost that we are missing out, and we need to bridge the gap. And I think, again, that the advantage we have is for the National Assembly at this material time, ahead of 2027 election, to make that count. Let's not wait another 4 years or 10 years for another reform and lose this opportunity. We need more women to be seated in the National Assembly or in the State Assembly to bring issues that are not currently on the table to the table, to bring empathy to the table. Empathy at this time is critical, critically very important, because I'm not saying that as a male, I don't have empathy. I do, but I also think, based on my work, based on what I know, because previously I've had to support women, very fantastic women who can lead change in this country, but majority of them are classified not electable because of gatekeepers in the political party system. What will this law do? It will make gatekeepers to recognize that that one seat is important.
We've seen women bring stability to tickets. So we've seen some governors do things like, of course, they control the local government, making sure that the vice chairman of local government are women. We've seen them have deputies that are women. You know, you can go on and on as far as this is concerned. But we cannot talk about this without talking about how to navigate culture, depending on where you're looking at. Cultural issues that inhibit certain level of progress and progression as far as the ambition of women is concerned. Are you considering that in your advocacy?
Yes. So, you see, one of the things that we deal with culture is law. So it's clear. So before now, we have in the Southeast that women don't partake of property rights and all of those, but one law settles it. One pronouncement from the judiciary settled it all. The truth of the matter is that culture will continue to have its way if there's no enabling law that controls culture. In any case, culture is social. It changes over time. That is why today, the way we dress has changed. In fact, culture without law has changed over time. But for change to happen like immediately, you need law to control human behavior. Otherwise, as of today, we still would have been having what we call, I don't want to say, I don't want to offend any ethnic group, but let me try to change that. That before now, you have former President Buhari said, women is for the kitchen. And you saw those accusations. People came up and said, no, don't say that. But that was a norm culturally. Laws changes culture. It puts behavior in check. And that is why law is better to respond to culture than waiting over a period of time for culture to change. Culture does change. Today, when you talk about the man is the head of the house, which of course I agree to, that's okay. But there are households today that the women provide substantial support that men value. I am a party to that. I agree that my wife provides substantially to the house. So am I an infidel in the Christian faith? No, I am not. Do I need her not to work? I want her to work. She brings something to the table. So let's bring the women's voice to the table in the National Assembly. So we're saying most homes today that are viable are because the women contribute viably to the household table. It is time, in fact, I'm sure you will also agree with me, that Madam provides substantially to home building. Let our madams provide substantially to national building or to nations building.
The eyes have it, and I'm one of the eyes, as a matter of fact. I'm a he for she, absolutely. So this advocacy has been on just for us to be able to look for an ingenious way to crack the greed of men in politics who want to occupy. And I realize as well that when the competition is quite stiff, that's when it's quite difficult for women to come in because of funding issues, mobilization. But we have to look for a way to include women. But thank you, Mr. Alson Aigbe, gender rights advocate and a member of civil society. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. And the way to do it is special seats.
We'll get started with that. Thank God the amendments are on Electoral Act, Constitution Amendment, maybe, who knows? So speak to your constituents, your representatives at the National Assembly. Maybe that's a good way to get started so that we can have a lot more ladies and women in our national and state assemblies. And maybe one day we'll get a female president in Nigeria. You may never know. But that's it on the program. Thank you for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye-bye.